Councillor Tony Randle from Wellington, letter from Wellington. Tony, how are you?
I'm very good, and I've been listening to you this morning, and I think you're on form today.
Well, just amazing. Did you catch up with the United States Supreme Court decision?
No, I haven't heard that one, but I've heard except what you've explained about it. But you know, to be, I mean, it's really weird because the Supreme Court also made another big decision yesterday, which was to get rid of Chevron Deference as well.
Oh yes, now explain that one, Tony, to us, because it is quite important in terms of New Zealand's environmental policy, or at least what other overseas countries do. Explain that one to us.
So in America, when the Congress makes up a law, the big departments not only make up how it's to be implemented, but they also can set up their own courts and adjudicate on whether or not it's being complied with. And somebody came along and said that, I don't know the exact details of the case, but there was something to do with some water regulations, and the department came along and said, not only are we going to regulate you, but we're going to charge you for the regulations, and there was no appeal. And so they started charging them, a lot of money, thousands of dollars, to regulate them on this law, and they appealed saying, you can't just make this stuff up and not let me appeal. And the Supreme Court said, no. So it's clipping the wings of the big government departments in the United States. So, it's almost like the opposite direction is what this Supreme Court decision is, to make the president, really a king.
Actually, though, having said that, the Supreme Court got this one absolutely right. Just to explain to you, so the government passes a law. This is how it works. You're right, Tony, I've just remembered it now. The government passes a law, and it's sort of hazy as to what the law actually means, right? Now, in New Zealand, we'd settle that at a court, usually. We would go to court and say, okay, what does this actually mean? What was Parliament intending to do with this piece of legislation? It happens all the time in the environmental realm. The Chevron Deference doctrine was that whoever administers the law, whether it's, say, the Ministry of Environment, for example, or the Department of Education or something like that, they get to interpret it. And you're right, Tony, you couldn't, in actual fact, appeal over their interpretation, even if they got it blatantly wrong.
Exactly right. And so it's fascinating watching American Supreme Court decisions, because it's such a totally different way of working out how a country should work. It's very litigious, yet behind the scenes there are some very big, strong anchors like the right to free speech, the right to due process, like the Miranda. People would know about the Miranda. Well, the Miranda is named after... Miranda which is you need to know your rights when you're being arrested. That's actually named after a guy called Miranda who wasn't read his rights and therefore got illegally convicted. And so... it's fascinating. But New Zealand, I think, is a little. I think because we're smaller, we're a little closer in touch with things, and so we can, we don't get these huge departments which are just essentially invulnerable empires in their own right. We can, as you've been rightly doing today, criticise them, and it's pretty straightforward. What the hell is happening?
Just apropos that suppression case, I've just got to cut in there, Tony. I've got a couple of points. Just Sean and somebody else says. Sharon says that press release was on the radio news too yesterday from the police, and you're right, Sharon, it was. And Sean says, I've just Googled that police case. It's the top of the search list. Of course it is. And I've just cross-checked social media, even the LinkedIn comments on posts. The horse is truly bolted. We're talking about that suppression case, Tony, where the police got it wrong yesterday, and now are trying to suppress all details and just don't seem to understand how the real world works. Talking about the real world, Tony, the Wellington mayors are discussing a Wellington super city. Now, this has been around for a while. You've got Upper Hutt, you've got Hutt, you've got Wellington, and you've got Pororua. And it's been ruminated for a long time, or for a while now, probably 20 years, Tony. You were probably overseas when it first started talking. And it was particularly in the wake of Auckland being made a super city. that Wellington should do the same. And you're saying that this idea is back on the agenda in Wellington.
Yes, I think, all the councils are doing, it's 18% plus, I think the regional council at 20% in terms of rates increase. And, now they're talking about amalgamation as a way to remove some of the costs. And again, now this was floated, you're right, about 20 years ago, I think under Fran Wild, when she was in charge of the regional council. And she talked about having a Lord Mayor of Wellington. But that collapsed because no one really supported it. But I think the cost pressure and is saying they're casting around for answers, and one of the answers is to make the councils bigger. I'm sceptical about that myself, but there are some councillors who are very keen to look into it.
Yeah, I must admit, I'd look at it. I forgot you'd also add the Greater Wellington Regional Council to that mix as well, so you'd have, 5 councils involved. Surely, the problem that I've got with councils, Tony, and it's the same problem you've got, is they're so top-heavy with managerial staff, all paid exorbitant salaries, don't seem to do much. Surely if you had a bigger council, you could get rid of 4/5 of them. That's one layer, but the other layer, of course, is that the more staff you have, the more layers you've got to do. So you actually go up as well. But my big concern is I'm seeing the biggest problem that this Wellington City Council has is it's just lost touch with what the communities want. And I think making it bigger is not going to solve that problem, yet I think that's the main problem. We need to look at solutions that will make them more accountable for what they're doing, and making it bigger, on my observation, is makes it less accountable. I understand what you're saying, Tony, and I know you're a Conservative, so you'd be a centre-right politician. You sit as a minority around currently the Wellington City Council table. But, and here's the but I'll pose to you. The people of Wellington, 18 months ago, elected the council you've got now. It's a Liberal left council. The whole of New Zealand was going centre-right, including, for God's sake, Dunedin, but not Wellington. They went the other way, and then they went the other way again 8 months. They went even more the other way, if you like, in terms of the general election results as well. Is it just that your council is representative? You are a bunch of greeny pinkos. I've been involved in a debate on one of the social platforms about the 18.5% rates increase we've settled on in a long-term plan decision. And there's a lot of complaints about it, and I had to respond exactly as what you said. We voted for a majority of Labour and Green councillors and left-leaning independents, and they want to spend all this money on stuff like cycleways, and now the bills come in, people are starting to complain. I think the phrase is sort of, it's a bit like a combination of, there's no such thing as a free lunch, and the chickens are coming home to roost in terms of the Wellington City. And, because all the stuff, noble that it is, well-intentioned, like zero waste recycling, green waste recycling, it all costs money. And that makes it expensive. Wellington is very left-leaning. I think the rest of the councils to the north are not quite so left-leaning. So that might be a good thing in terms of amalgamation, is trying to moderate some of the mood of the particular population inside Wellington City. Well, yes, ameliorate that. You're right. Can I also ask though? Wellington's derided through much of the country at the moment. It's pretty obvious that even though literally thousands of Wellingtonians have lost or will lose their job in the public sector, there's no sympathy, no real sympathy or empathy from the rest of New Zealand to do that at all, from the polling that we've seen. Is it just that Wellington is always going to be unique, that even if there was an election held tomorrow in Wellington, the composition of your council table wouldn't change much, or do you think it would change, Tony?
I think it would change. I think, and you're seeing this actually in other countries as well, where we went through a period, especially during COVID, when we all had this sort of war mentality, pull together, help each other out. Our Prime Minister was famous for the "be kind" phrase, but what people saw was that was used by some of the leaders to do some pretty obnoxious things. Cast out some people because they didn't believe in vaccines, make people, socially distance. And look, there's good reasons for that, and that was the mood. But I think now the mood is in a different place. Now the mood is we're actually facing some real pragmatic problems. We just don't have enough money to spend on everything. We can't keep on borrowing and spending after a whole period of borrowing and spending. And I think there's a whole group in the middle who are changing their feelings around that. And I think the mood in Wellington is changing, at least in the middle. And I think if we held an election, we are having an election next year, but I think by the time of that next election, I think you will end up with a different constituency around the City Council.